Okay, so we had been looking the last day at search engine optimization, and there's a lot in that, and I have a lot more to say about that, but I was detecting a bit of boredom in my own voice even. So what we'll probably do is next week we move on to something else, and then we'll come back to search engine optimization a bit later on. Okay? But we're going to look at search engine optimization today, and then I'm also going to look at Google Analytics a bit. So we had been talking about the ways in which you could make it easier for search engines to figure out what your website was about. I pointed out that search engine optimization isn't about trying to fool Google. It isn't about trying to trick anyone. It's just about trying to make it easier for the search engine to match you up with people who want your stuff. Okay? When we had left it, we've been talking about making your site easier to navigate. You can have a sitemap for users, for the humans, and there's also a special kind of sitemap you can generate in XML just for the search engines. So it helps them figure out where everything is and how things fit together. You want to create a naturally flowing hierarchy where you have your main page, and then think of your contents and how they might be broken up into sections, and then perhaps have subsections in there or whatever. So if you have a lot of content, it can be a real challenge to break it up into sections. So if I had, for example, all of the content for this module on a website, the first thing I'd have to do is sit down and think about, okay, well, what are the different sections? And then what's in those? Maybe there's subsections again. If you think of, all of the stuff you can buy in Tesco Extra, a lot of thought has gone into, well, this stuff belongs in this section, this stuff belongs in this section, and more importantly, this section is next to this section. The toothbrushes are never very far from the toothpaste. And there's a whole science and art to organizing that. A 404 page is what you get when the server is asked for a page that doesn't exist. So an unhelpful 404 page is, does not compute, feck off. And a helpful 404 page is, you looked like you were looking for something to do with whatever. Here are the pages we have to do with this. Here are the pages with the URLs closely matching what you might have been looking for. And here's a link to the sitemap if you want to have a browse around. So you can submit your home page to Google and the sitemap along with it, which is a good idea. The big thing search engines are trying to do is to separate the wheat from the chaff, to identify quality websites so they can put those higher up in the rankings and keep their customers happy. So if you have, well-formed HTML and XHTML, that could have an impact. So it's a bit like your spelling. If there's dodgy spelling, someone's going to go, well, this guy is telling me I should, take these tablets to cure the pain in my back, but he can't spell tablet properly. Should I trust this person's advice? Similarly, if the page has spelling mistakes in it, that's going to be a problem. But less obvious is if the HTML is dodgy, that could factor into a search engine's equations. Although I did see a video recently where Google was saying that they don't really punish people for bad HTML because, we live in an imperfect world. So, I don't know. No. Not that any of you, because you're so well trained already, would even dream of mixing the style information with the content in the same page. You wouldn't dream of doing that, but it doesn't go without saying that you shouldn't do that. So obviously you have your HTML that has the content of the page, and then all of the styling information. It's this background color, it's this lovely font, it's this font isn't this lovely shade of green. All of that is in a separate CSS file. It's vital that you do that, because if it's all thrown in there together, it can be very hard to even see, what the page is about if you're just looking at the HTML file. If you consider the assignment you did last semester for SOF 6007, if you didn't have a browser and all you had was the text file with the HTML in it, you could have a stab at reading everything. You could have a stab at reading the menu, at finding out about the restaurant. Now, if all of the styling information was in there, so if you take, for example, if you type up something in Microsoft Word, and maybe newer versions have improved, but certainly until quite recently, if you typed up a document in Microsoft Word and then said, file save as HTML file, well, good luck reading the content. You'd have a page of gibberish before you even got anywhere, and then the styling information is embedded in there and stuff. So that's absolutely vital, but I know you wouldn't dream of doing that anyway. It's kind of obvious, but if you have a good site, then it will start to percolate up in the rankings. I mean, if it's useful and if it's good, well, then it'll feature. So even if you did nothing, if you had a good quality offering, you would get customers. There may be different kinds of user, and it may be useful for you to cater to different kinds. So if you have a skateboarding website, maybe beginners have a different set of needs than advanced skateboarders. Certainly you'd find that with surfers, there'd be a big difference. It's important to offer unique and exclusive content. Like if your website has a stuff that's just copied and pasted from other places and reorganized, apart from the ethical and legal issues surrounding that, Google's going to look at that and say, well, this isn't offering anything that I haven't seen before. Like there's nothing new here at all. It's not a whole lot of use then. It's also quite pointless. I mean, what's the point of putting stuff on the web that's already there? There was an entire group of businesses who would look at what people were searching for at a given time. So what are the top 50 Google searches this week? And then they would commission people, pay them $10, $15 to write an article that would match perfectly those searches. So they would get traffic and then, sell advertising on foot of that. And the quality was pretty poor, and often it wasn't very original. And these sites were ranking quite high in the searches, so Google tweaked its algorithm, and I mean, you don't see those anymore now. Like if you haven't got anything to say, don't bother, People aren't interested in, they can Google themselves. If they want to copy and paste stuff, they can do it themselves. Okay? You want to write easy to read text. Okay? You want to stay organized around a particular topic, and like I said, you want unique content. You can get too hung up in writing for the search engine, write for people. It's a good idea to have a sensible anchor text. So let me show you what I mean by that. If you say, see a list of best albums, and the link, the anchor is list of best albums, well, a search engine seeing that will know that the page it links to has the key terms, the keywords list, best, and albums. Those keywords will be associated with that page, the one that you're going to. And obviously the anchor is short, so a little real estate is available there, has been used for, best albums. So that's insight that the search engine can use. That's much more useful than what I tend to do a lot, say, click here for blah de blah de blah de blah de blah. So a link that has the term here, a page that has the link here associated with it, doesn't mean anything really. And so it's losing out, you're losing out on an opportunity there. So that's an opportunity to give the search engine some information. Also, you want to format the links so that they're easily identifiable. I hate that default blue that they come in. If you don't style your page at all, the text might be black, the background might be white or grey on a bad day, and the links will be some awful gaudy blue, and then visited links are sort of a darker blue. I hate that blue. But it would be very foolish of me to change in the style sheet that blue to black. And also I don't like all those underlining, I think that looks ugly. But if I was to change my links so that they looked the same as the rest of the page, like, where does a person know where to click? Like, okay, it's all very well to say, well, they could hover around the page, and then when they hit the link, the cursor would change. But that's, we call that mystery meat navigation, where like you go looking and there's a link. That's no good, So, you need to make them easy to spot. Okay. You could also have anchors within the document, and that can be useful if the web page is large. Now, images are the real killer, I think, when it comes to search engine optimization. Last year, Google ran a contest where they were basically getting students to sell advertising. So they would give you, I think it was €300 worth of free advertising to sell, to promote a company's website. And the idea was that the companies would be so hooked they'd sign up. And so some students in the class entered that. It was like a competition. If you were the best team, you went to, I think you got to go to Google headquarters in Dublin first, which wasn't a huge prize, if you can go to Dublin any day of the week. But the winners then would go to California or something. But one of the first things people had to do was actually look at the site and see, well, before you do any advertising, what could you do to make it better? And we stumbled upon a business in Ballincollig that had a super cool, super sexy, swishy, attractive, clearly very well designed website. But all of the information was inside in images. And so if you looked at the web page as a search engine would see it, you got the HTML and all you saw was this is a web page with loads and loads and loads of images. Oh, and they've got an address in Ballincollig. And that's all you could tell. So that website, despite being really, really attractive, was totally useless because it was invisible to search engines. Okay, if you saw, the URL painted on the side of a bus, you could type it in or you could look for the name, and I guess the name would come back. But if you wanted the services they were offering, there was nothing. It was a completely useless page. And so it's important, if you have images on the page, that you don't hide important information in them. So we often say an image is worth 1,000 words, but in search engine terms it's worth nothing. Because Google can't Well, it's getting to the point. I mean, we will get to the point where if you were say, I want a picture of, whatever, Google might be able to see into images and recognize them. But we're not there yet. So it only has the text to go on. Search engines see text. That's pretty much all they see. So this is where the alt attribute in your image tags is really important. You need the alt attribute for it to be syntactically correct. But you could just say alt equals picture and at least, the HTML would validate. But it's very important that you say what the what is actually in the image. Okay? So if it's a picture of 2 people on a horse dressed as clowns, your alt attribute should say, 2 people on a horse dressed as clowns. At least then, if someone does a search for horse and clowns, you're at the races. File names are also useful. Personally, I have the terrible habit of doing image 001, image 002, image 003. I'm like, they're all the same. But image files are very short, of short names. Same with any file name. I've got a limited real estate there, and so if I call the image, horseclownpeople.jpg, if those keywords are appearing in the actual file name of the image, well, that then is a very good indicator for the search engine that image has got something to do with those keywords. Whereas if I just call it image75.jpg, okay, well, it's a JPEG. That's all it knows. So file names and alt tags can be used like that. Okay? So this is the point I was making. Now, you can have super sexy images across the top of your page with the company name and your little tagline, Hyper Mega Corp, we are fabulous or something, and your lovely logo. As long as you don't put the important information only in images. And that's what that crowd in Ballincollig did. All the important information was only available in images. I remember years ago, I couldn't figure out, I was trying to design a web page, and I noticed that the WIT web page had the text always perfectly lined up. As the page expanded and contracted, the text stayed perfect. I was saying, how do they do that? Because when my page expands and contracts, it's all over the shop. So I went looking for inspiration and looked at the HTML, and I discovered that the text of the front page was one huge GIF. So no wonder it didn't move. It was just an image. So it looked great, it printed fine, it was always lined up perfectly, but of course it was totally illegible to a search engine. So WIT.ie, they do huge feck off GIFs. That's all I know about that. So and obviously that was a long time ago, but it's laughable now, but it made sense at the time. So must make sure not to do that. No. So your alt text there, and file names can help. Also, it's important to realize now that if someone's doing a search, right, Google and many other search engines will come up with, say, on the first page, 20 websites or 20 pages. But they also might have, 10 or 15 images there. So even if the content of your website and the text of your website doesn't put you in the, top 20 first page of Google, if you have an image that matches the search quite well, then your image might get up there. And if someone clicks on the image, they're going to click on your page and you've got them. So if you have an attractive image, but more importantly, one that is tagged properly so that Google can see what the image is about, then you're in the shot. I was going to say I could bet you that if we had two people on a horse dressed as clowns and we had an image and a page with that, if the image was tagged properly, we'd probably be in the first page. But I was thinking after, sure, rodeo clowns are very common, in fact, so maybe not. But get my point that the image can get you the customer. If the content, if the text doesn't, the image might. Okay. You might also want to put an actual text on the page. The description meta tag is still useful. Some search engines still use it. Generic meta tag not so much, because that's been abused. Most of them ignore it, but the description is still good. No. So when you were doing SOF 6007, your lecturer was probably hammering on all the time about the importance of using H1 and H2 instead of just big and bold and beautiful. So as humans, when we look at a document and we see that there's, lots of text in a certain font, and then in certain places there's text that's bigger and bolder, well, we can gauge from the relative size of the fonts that, this is the title of the document, this here is a heading, this is a heading, this is bigger than the regular text but smaller than those other ones, so that's probably a subheading. We can see that visually, but of course a browse search engine looking at that is only going to see, here's some text in one style, oh, here's text in another style, oh, here's some text in a different style again. The meaning of big, small, smaller, regular, the meaning associated with that is lost completely if you just do it in a style. So it's important to actually specify, your title, your H1, and then your H2s and your H3s. And also, if you have a H2 and inside that there's a bunch of H3s, well, there's a relationship there. There's a connection between those sections of the page and there's meaning in that relationship that is lost if you just style it. So imagine you're writing an outline or something. Okay. Make use of the robots. Obviously, we mentioned that before. No follow is very useful. On your blogs, you notice in the comments section, there's an option to put in the no follow for the comments. So if you have a website and you've put a lot of work into it and it has quite a good reputation, whatever that might be, however that's measured, but it has a good reputation, and you allow people to add comments, and 200 people come along and put in their comments links to buy drugs without prescriptions, get your free Viagra, whatever. And there's all these links from your website to, spam and crap and rubbish. Well, the connection between your website and the links to those, the links from your website to those pages can harm your reputation and can cause your site to be seen in a poorer light. So what you can do is you can say to the spiders, there's bits coming up here, don't follow those links. Those links have nothing to do with me. Any links that appear in here, do what you want with them, but I'm not endorsing them, or they have nothing to do with me. So that could be really important. You need to tell Google if you have designed a special version for say mobile phones. So if someone is standing in the middle of Patrick Street and they're looking for some service and they type in the keywords, all other things being equal, a website that Google knows works well on mobile phones might appear ahead of one that doesn't. So if Google is aware that you are viewing the web page on a constrained display, whatever those constraints might be, if there's a website that matches, that's optimized for that, it might send you in that direction. I mentioned there the idea of having different versions of your website for different screen widths and stuff. There are a couple of different ways to do that, and that's really there's a whole other module about that kind of stuff. But on a good day, if someone comes on an iPhone, they go to a different site designed for iPhones. Okay? It's better if they come to the web page and because they're on an iPhone, it triggers a different style sheet, but the HTML is the same. So they're looking at the same page, but the style sheet is different. It's really much better if they come to the page and the page is just designed in such a way that if you shrink it, everything lines up nice, so that they're seeing the exact same page as everyone else, but it adapts to the width. And so that's a big deal in web design at the moment. You're trying to design web pages that will dynamically adjust themselves, the formatting, depending on the width that they have. Because obviously, on an iPhone, you used to have much, the screen is much, it's first of all, it's portrait instead of landscape, things like that. Okay, so if you can tip Google off to the fact that your website looks great on iPhones and someone is actually looking at an iPhone, it can help that. Okay, so you can run mobile and desktop versions, but actually ideally they would kind of be the same but different. You want to promote your website in the right ways as well. So if you have a website on surfing, the other people who have good websites on surfing might be prepared to link to yours. And if they have a good reputation, the fact that they're linking to yours can, improve your reputation. I mean, you can pay people to generate 500 make-uppy websites that have links to your site, and that might get you a bump initially, but that'll fizzle out. That wouldn't be fooling anyone. Just like you can pay for Facebook likes and you can pay for Twitter followers, you can sort of pay for links, but generally what would happen is once you get found out, you'll be held in the same esteem as people selling magical mystery diet pills that'll make it, you don't want to be associated with those kinds of websites. If you if there's a blog about a particular topic, if there's some really popular surfer blog, he might be quite happy to tell people, Dan in Cork has just launched a Surfing Cork web page, and it has all the cool surfing spots in Cork, whatever. Okay, and there's a whole business now of kind of managing those kind of things. In fact, I'll show it to you because I put a link on the blog, so it's probably handy. But I saw this job ad today. Oh great, the link doesn't work. Great. So digital marketing manager, decent enough money, and optimize the customer journey and really focus on improving the customer experience. Manage a program of SEO for the sites, search engine optimization. And a big thing nowadays is having an understanding of how social media works and how you can use social media to drive traffic to your website and hopefully, get sales and things. So there's a whole business, a whole even job doing stuff like that. So there's quite a lot to it. Now, so what I want to talk about now a little bit, show you a little bit, is analytics. So Google, you probably are aware, sells advertising. And what happens is if you put an ad on Google, you pay Google, they place ads at various places, usually related to searches that people have done. And if someone clicks on the ad, then they have to, you have to pay Google. If they don't click, that's okay, you don't pay. But Google figured out that if people could see what was driving traffic to their websites, if they could see, for example, what search terms people were using, if they could see what ads people were clicking on, they would feel happier about spending money and seeing that things are working. So what Google can do is it can give you a snippet of code for you to put on your web page, and every time someone loads that web page, that piece of code, triggers, like it goes looking for something on the Google server. That's logged with like an ID number, and so Google can say, okay, well, someone just loaded, dansbikes.com page 12.html or something, okay? But you can get quite a lot of very interesting information. So I asked you to turn on Google Analytics, well, to sign up for Google Analytics and then put the code into your blog. So you didn't actually have to put any HTML or JavaScript or anything, because Blogger was expecting you. So, because Blogger is from Google as well. So you just put in the little code, in fact, that it gave you, and you can see all sorts of information. So I thought it would be interesting to look at the stats for my CIT blog, and we can just see the kinds of information you can get. So you can look at what's happening right now. So this was 130 page views today. Daily, you can see that obviously, nothing happened overnight. So you could tell now, for example, that the kinds of people using this website aren't going, they're not using it at night. So, if I had a website that was things to do when you're really bored, you might find that every night watchman and security guard up and down the country was there at night, clicking through and stuff. And you might find that during the day it's not used at all, and during the night it is. So I can tell a lot about the habits of my users just looking at this, for example. So they don't do much at night. So if I was advertising, if I was going to buy some advertising, I wouldn't bother showing my ads in the middle of the night. All my people are asleep. Clearly people come in the morning into labs or whatever and might have to go look for something, then eases off over the day. Do my students, it's mostly my students looking at this in fairness, do they work, mostly the weekend, or, what day was that? The 26th was when? Yesterday. Okay, so this is probably the weekend here, so people don't do much over the weekend. What I find interesting is that looking at, clearly people work more in the middle of the week. Looking at the stats for my blog, you could easily tell that it's something to do with higher education. Over the summer, very little happens, and then you can see like a semester. You could even tell it's semesterized. You could even tell from my stats when we have our Easter break, just because the traffic eases off. Whereas, if this was the Coca-Cola website or something, you wouldn't see those seasonal patterns so much. Okay. You can look then at the things that are viewed the most. So this past month, this plan for week 3 was viewed the most. This comment here. As a lecturer, for example, if I saw that a particular class was being used a lot, or was featuring really prominently, that could be for a number of reasons. Maybe it was particularly interesting or funny or embarrassing or something. Maybe I tripped over or said something I shouldn't have. Or, maybe it's a particularly difficult topic, so people had to view it again and again. Or people having to view it again and again maybe means that I did it really badly or something. There could be any number of reasons, but it does give you some sort of insight. You can see here that most of the people who come to my blog go to Google and then come via there, although some people have either come internally within the blog or have typed in colinmcit.blogspot.com. In terms of the things that have been most popular this month, that plan for the week there was useful. It's no great surprise that the assessment information is the number one thing that gets clicked on in terms of the pages. So a bunch of pages, the list of things you have to do for the assignments, that's always something that gets a lot of traffic. These sources from google.ie, no great shock there. This tells me that there are either people in Poland very interested in what I'm doing, which isn't likely. So the most likely explanation for lots of traffic coming via google.pl is that some Polish people taking my class have their default either language or default search engine set to google.pl or the language set to Polish. Maybe they do a lot of searching for things in Polish normally, and so when they crank up their machines, it goes to Google in Poland and they find me via there. That's the more likely explanation. I doubt I'm huge in Poland or anything. Yep, so there we go. People finding me from Facebook, that's a surprise to me. Possibly what's going on there is that one or two of the classes have set up Facebook groups, and somebody might say, oh look, on such and such a day we did whatever, and include the link. Or they might just have put in a link to my blog. The class rep might have done that. So this month, 12 people came to the blog from Facebook. You could see if this was a business, and I was selling stuff on my blog, it would be really, really important to me to know how people are finding me. Search keywords is absolutely vital if you're a business. Unfortunately, it's kind of no-brainer. People looking for Colin Manning stuff, do a search for Colin Manning. That hasn't come as a great shock to me. So Colin Manning, all one word, Colin space Manning, Colin MCIT. You'd think if you could remember that, you could remember the .blogspot.com part. And you can see there. Okay. CIT Cork and colour blindness. Okay, there's a story there. I don't know what it is. I'm not colourblind, in case you were wondering. You get information about your audience. It's obviously no great shock that the bulk of people looking at my page are in Ireland. But I mean, if I had a website that was dealing with all of Europe, for example, let's say, Crocs, those kind of plasticky shoes. They might have one website for all of Europe. It's of use to them to know where people are looking, where they're coming from. If that company launched a big advertising campaign on the radio in Ireland, and they didn't see an increase in people coming from Ireland, well, they know they'd wasted their money. The United States is always going to feature just by virtue of being so large. I mean, there's 100 times more people in the US than Ireland. So it's not like you must remember the relative number. You can't look at them relatively. It's not like that I'm, 5 times more popular in Ireland than I am in the US. Like, I don't rate in the US at all. No huge surprises there. Some surprises in terms of the browsers. Okay, I was very surprised that so many people use Chrome. So a regular website, like say the RTE website or something, would see nothing like 52% Chrome users. Do you know what I mean? I would say RTE probably sees, mostly Internet Explorer, which kind of is very low for me. So someone looking at this might speculate that there are a lot of nerds. Is nerds derogatory? I don't know. But there are a lot of geeks visiting this webpage because, let's face it, most people don't even know they have a browser. They just have the interweb thing. And, that someone using Chrome has gone to the trouble of finding out where they can download it and has installed it on their machine. Or that they have a preference for Chrome. Most people don't even know they have a browser, let's face it. Okay? I was surprised also, well, I suppose not that surprised. So most of the labs, all the labs you use are Windows machines, so you'd have 82%. That's fair enough. If you look there at iPhones and iPads, for example, you can't view Flash on an iPhone or an iPad. So if I was teaching some really complex subject and I was going to devise these super cool interactive learny yoke-imajigs in Flash. Let's say for your programming, I could do some cool thing where you could organize your, for loops and all sorts of mad cool stuff. And someone would say to me, yeah, but like if you do that in Flash now, the people on the iPads and the iPhones, won't be able to use it. And I'd be able to say, well, yeah, well, so what? Clearly the people who come to my blog don't care. I don't have that many iPhone and iPad users. Now, Apple, on the other hand, if we were to get Apple's stats, I suspect that an awful lot of people going to the Apple website have iPads and iPhones and Macs. So it can, knowing the profile of your users and knowing you're getting the stats can give you very important information about some of the decisions you might make. So if you like Flash is a good example. If the airport websites in Ireland, if you want to look at where you can go, they have this interactive map yoke, but only works in Flash. That might be bad. We should look at their stats and see, well, how many people actually come to the airport website with iPhones and iPads. But I would actually say it's much higher than this. I'd say at an airport you get an awful lot of iPhones because iPhones are the only show in town when you're in the airport. So you can impact on the decisions you make. Now, so this is what you get with Blogger. This comes with Blogger, which is quite a lot of information as it is. However, if you plug in the Google Analytics and then you go to the Analytics website, you get way more. Now again, unfortunately, the kinds of people coming to my blog are very homogeneous. There's not a huge variety. So we can't see terribly interesting things. But if you were a business selling stuff, this could be really important. So I used Crocs as an example. I mean, if I could, so this tells me in demographics, for example, and look at the age profile. So remember, Google knows a lot about you individually. So when you come to my blog now, Google knows, person 74913724724X. That's who that is. I know something about that. So it's telling me, for example, that this is the age profile of people that visit my blog. Now, these are the people that it knows about. It may only know a percentage of them. Okay? So that's probably kind of what you'd expect. I'm surprised there's so many older people, but of course mature students are very studious, so they probably come more often. It's telling me that it's 54% male and 45% female. Now again, if I'm selling shoes, this is something I need to know. I'm not really selling anything, so, it's telling me that 5.5% of them are interested in sports, individual sports, running and walking. Now you might ask, how in the name of God does it know? But obviously it's decided it knows that about those people. Food and drinks, cooking and recipes, soups and stews, 3%. I mean, if I'm selling shoes, this is information I can use. I know I can advertise in, Cooking and Recipe Monthly. And that, I might be preaching to the choir to some extent. People are interested in travel. So Google knows stuff about people. That's the overview. Gender interests was here, wasn't it? Overview, affinity, categories. All right, so I must enable this. I wish you will turn it on, see what happens. Oh, okay, that's another day's work. So it could tell me much more if I wanted. Whatever, I'm not interested in that now. Okay. Language information. Again, if I'm one website for all of Europe, it's useful for me to know what language preferences people have. The vast bulk of my visitors are their browsers rather, are set to US English, which probably suggests that the browsers in the labs in CIT are set to US English instead of UK English. So you might find, for example, as an experiment, we might discover that the spell checker in the browsers is set to American rather than British spelling. A certain percent after English comes Polish. We kind of suspected that anyway, because we knew that someone was coming from Google in Poland. So it's no great surprise that their browser might also be set to Polish. Again, if you're doing anything in Ireland, obviously that's not coming as a shock to you. Bizarrely, this is probably me actually, bizarrely there's people who've set their browser or identified who they are as speaking the Irish version of English. There's probably no difference between that and UK British English. Although, if I had, if I noticed, for example, that like the numbers were reversed and 80% of the people coming to my website had their browsers set to Irish English, which doesn't happen by default, It might tell me that I shouldn't probably be advertising in, Royalty Monthly or something, Somebody who would go to the trouble of identifying themselves as not being a UK browser, a British browser, would probably not be ES there is That's actually probably me. People in my house have machines set to Spanish. Again, some Brazilian Portuguese as opposed to European Portuguese. You know, an interesting one there. RU is Russian, TR is Turkish. Okay, the things like the bounce rate. So this tell me, for example, which percentage of my visitors are new visitors. That's actually surprisingly high, because I would expect most people looking at my blog would be you guys, that you'd come back again and again and again. If you're a business, you don't like to have a very high bounce rate. Bounce rate is where someone comes to the web page and then fecks off again straight away. If your bounce rate is very high, that's a suggestion that your web page isn't very engaging. You can even do things like, let's just have a look there now. Behavior, like location, we kind of covered that really. We know they're all in Ireland, let's face it. New versus returning. So how many people are new visitors? How often they've come back. I believe this is distorted because in this machines in CIT, when you log out, everything associated with you is white. And I suspect that when you come back, if you were to come back to my website, come back to my blog the next day, Google would see you as a whole new person. Whereas most people, their machine would be identifiable as the same machine, or they'd be identifiable as the same person. But you know, if you have a website and you want to develop a kind of a community, you want to know that people are coming back again and again and again. Bounce rate, I mentioned, engagement, how long they stayed at the site. So the vast bulk of my visitors were in and out in under 10 seconds. That's pretty bad. If you were a company that someone came to your website and stayed for less than 10 seconds and left, it's a very bad sign. The explanation I have is that most people are looking for the PDF that explains what's on the assignment. And so they get in, click on that PDF, click on the link to that PDF, and that's them gone. So that could explain how they're in and out in 10 seconds. But if you were trying to engage your customers, you'd be very disappointed if you were, so people were in and out in 10 seconds. Do you know? Like if you'd spent, $2,000 on web design, if you're like, permanent TSB, and you discover, having spent loads of money on your new website, that most people are in or out in 10 seconds, well, they're not switching. They're not, buying, getting mortgages. They obviously just came, looked, didn't like it, and fecked off. So you can get a multitude of information from Google. Another one here, the bulk of people were using an Ethernet, 12% of people on Aircom. So this says to me as a lecturer that a lot of people are looking at the stuff from home. Like 12% of the people coming to my website are doing it from Aircom, and that's not from inside CIT. That's useful information. If you're a business, knowing people are surfing from home rather than at work, that tells you a lot. Many mobile people. 92% desktop. Again, that shouldn't come as a surprise to us. Most people don't open my blog from one end of the week except when they sit down in the lab. Devices. No, it's not that. All right, that doesn't seem to square now with. Maybe this is the people that knew what device they were on. I don't know what custom is. I can do other things. You can even track the path someone takes through your website. This is really powerful. So someone arrives at the front door. Where do they go from there? What pages do they go to? Things like that. You can find out an awful lot. So it's not enough now to build a website, put it up there, and maybe hope people find it. Even when you get them, you have to figure out what they're doing once they've gotten there. And this is, of course, before we even factor in the advertising. If you've paid for ads, Google can tell you, this ad was shown this many times to people in this age group, and 20% of them clicked on it. And when they got here, they did this, and then 5% of those bought something at the end. You can even track someone from the ad all the way through your site to them actually making a purchase. And so you can then work out, okay, what's the value of those kinds of people to me? You might find, for example, that people in a certain age group coming to you from CIT, they're all very, very clicky, but they're not buy-y, So you wouldn't waste your time on those. They come and have a poke around, but they never buy anything. Well, not going to waste any time getting those visitors anymore. You might decide that people over 40 who see this ad, who are on iPhones, are very likely to actually buy something. And so you might decide to go after those kind of people. So there's a whole science of this. It's a whole job. This could be your whole job all day, analyzing all these kinds of numbers and stuff. Okay? So that's Google Analytics. So next week we won't carry on with the search engine optimization. We'll move on to something else altogether and then come back to it.